Joining us now is Rudd Brown. Rudd is the founder and former CEO of RiseX. RiseX is a wonderful company that I wrote a short snippet about in the customer-funded business, and here we're going to have an opportunity to get the inside story. Rudd, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome aboard.
Well, thank you, John. It's great to meet up with you again.
So you built a very nice business selling something that was then pretty scarce that customers found hard to get. Would you kind of walk us through how RiseX got started?
Well, the precursor to RiseX was an exercise I did, which I would recommend any person, particularly a young person, doing, which was I spent several months reflecting on what was important to me. And I actually took a book called What Color is Your Parachute?
Wonderful book.
A wonderful book, and did all the exercises in it. And then I went down to a vocational counseling center and said, would you test me for everything? And they said, well, that could take a couple of days. And my response is, I've got plenty of time. So I got them to do all the testing, and I did all the exercises in Parachute. And the end result was I was able to narrow down what was really important to me. And one of the things that was really important to me was that I spent my career in a socially and environmentally positive way. As I was trying to work out what the vehicle should be for that, I got a phone call from one of my former employees in Australia. I'd been the manager of a business in Australia before I had moved to Canada. And he asked me for some equipment that was no longer made. He said, you're living in North America, do you think you can find some of this for one of our mutual former clients? And I started looking around for that. And the first question I asked, which I'd suggest any entrepreneur asks, is, so what are you willing to pay for that stuff if I can find it? So I got the guy to identify up front that he was willing to pay $250 a unit if he could find these things. And then I went hunting around through the contacts that I'd built over the year that I'd been living in Canada. And I found people who had this equipment for sale. They no longer needed it, and they were willing to sell it for $25 a unit. Well, the light bulb goes off in my head.
I like those gross margins.
Like 90% works for me. And then being very cautious, not wishing to invest the time and very limited capital I had at buying this stuff, if this deal wasn't going to go through, I said to the guy in Australia, I said, look, I can get this stuff for you, 200 units as it was, so we're talking $50,000, but I need you to prepay for it. And he said, oh, okay, fine. And so he wired me the money. So I had the $50,000 in my hand before I went and spent the $5,000 to go and buy the equipment to fill the order.
The light bulb had indeed gone off, hadn't it?
It had indeed gone off. And then I proceeded to do several other deals with the same party in Australia over the course of that first year, and made a very handsome living in the first year.
Right. And then how did you discover that that this was a wider opportunity?
Well, to locate the equipment, to fill the order, what I had to do was call people who are using this equipment in North America. And my basic question was, hello, Mr. Operations Manager, or hello, Mr. Head of IT. I'm looking for some equipment you likely no longer use, and I'm looking to buy it. Now, hopefully the guy had said, oh, yes, I've got some of that. We stopped using them a couple of years ago, but they're sitting on the shelf in the warehouse. Sure, I'm happy to sell them to you because we were just going to throw them in the trash anyway. But the second part of the conversation would always pretty much turn out to be like this, which was, so what are you going to do with these if I sell them to you? And I worked out that the best response to that was, well, I sell this equipment to other, successful companies like yourself who are still standardized on an earlier technology platform, and they're looking for a few hundred additional units. Oh, the guys would say, funny you should mention that. we need some more equipment of the type we're using. Do you think you can find some? And so I built up this list. I built up what I called 3 lists. A want to buy list, what the guy wants to buy at the moment. A want to sell list, what he wants to sell at the moment. And what he's using, because I knew there was a technology cycle. And so within a 5-year period, this guy was going to, if he just installed it, at some point in the next 5 years, he was going to need additional equipment because stuff gets lost or broken, or you open more stores, or you add more employees. Or at the end of the 5 years, roughly, he's going to want to get rid of the old stuff.
And go to the new version.
And get the new version.
Yeah.
So by building up that database, I started having this, I became a matchmaker. I was matching between guys who had stuff they no longer needed, in which case in their mind it had 0 value, to guys who wanted stuff that was no longer manufactured, in which case anybody could come along and solve their problem. They didn't really care about price too much. And I sat in the middle in what proved in the early years to be an extremely high margin, cash flow positive business.
Yeah. So by the Great Recession of 2008, you had built quite a nice business, as I recall. But that recession was not kind to most IT hardware businesses, and including yours. So how did you cope with that surprise?